Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Hunter and to our first virtual Zoom tour. Thank you for joining us this early. I hope you have your hot beverage and you can follow us around the gallery as we show you some of the amazing pieces in the F word, we mean female. So I have several people in the gallery helping me with this tour. So if you will please type any questions you have as we go along into the chat, and we'll get to them as we're able to. And please bear with us. This is new tech for all of us, so we're sorting it out as we go. And let us know if you can't hear or can't see something. I believe you have to be in speaker view to get the best view of what you're seeing in the gallery. So let's talk about the F word. We started this exhibit planning a few years ago when we realized we had several works by women artists that didn't get on view as often as we'd like because they were either fragile, because they were made of textiles or other fragile materials, or simply because they were too large to put on view. And so we decided to put a few of them out, and then as we worked further on the exhibit, we realized, hey, we have a lot more things that we could put out, and we wanted to see them all together in this amazing space. And then, of course, it is the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage in the United States. And that actual day was just a couple of days ago, and Tennessee had a huge role to play in this, in passing the 19th Amendment. And so we wanted to celebrate all of that. We want to celebrate the work the Hunter has done to empower women artists. As you can imagine, women in the art world are underrepresented as they are in other fields. And the Hunter has made women artists an acquisition priority for the last 2 decades. And we want to share some of those pieces with you. So follow me to the first piece. So this is a work by artist Miriam Shapiro. It's probably one of the earliest in this exhibit, even though it was only made in 1983. And it's quite large, as you can see. It's almost 6 feet, 7 feet across. And it is an image of a robe. Miriam Shapiro is considered a pioneer in American art of the 20th century, and she's a leading female artist of that generation. And one of the reasons she is considered a pioneer is because of her unusual use of materials. She is using fabric that's been collaged on with paint, and the paint is also stenciled and block printed. Now, these are all processes that would not have been considered proper art making processes. It's not traditional painting or sculpture. And so she was kind of pioneering a new form of art making through the material she chose to use. And she came up with a term for this, which is called femage. And that's a combination of fabric and collage, and also a hint to the idea that a woman made it in feminine or feminist. The robe, of course, references the garments of a woman. It references the kimono in Japan. And it is a very elaborate robe and very beautiful, but it is not really the size or the shape of any one person. And it is a reference to the fact that men, if they portrayed a woman, would portray her as in clothing that was very fitted or as a nude, but she chooses instead to hint at the power of a woman rather than showing a particular body. So you have a lot of different things going on. In person, this almost appears to be like a quilt. And why is fabric important? Several of the pieces in this exhibit reference fabric. And the use of fabric is important because traditionally, fabric is associated with women. And by that I mean washing, laundry, sewing, mending, quilting, knitting. Those are all domestic tasks that women have done for centuries. And so using something that is associated with the quiet work of the house, the invisible world of women traditionally, and saying it can be an art medium and it can be a serious art medium was something that was really pushing the boundaries. And about a third of the works in this exhibit start with that premise. So we're going to look at another work that uses fabric in a very dramatic fashion. So this is a work by artist Leslie Dill. Leslie is from Maine, but lives in Brooklyn, New York. And you can see that it is a massive work. It is almost 50 feet across and 17 feet high. It is what we call a site-specific installation, which means it can be reworked to fit different spaces. And in fact, it was designed for an even bigger wall than the one we have. And it can go on smaller pieces, smaller walls. What you see here is a figure, and Leslie refers to this figure as a she. So you see a woman sitting here. It is about size to the artist, who's around 5 feet tall. And from the figure flow these massive banners up into the world. Or if you want to look at it a different way, it's a lot of thoughts and words and prayers coming into the person. The artist Leslie Dill is very interested in the intersection of text with the figure. So every work you see by her has that combination of items going on. What this piece came from is the Tongues on Fire Vision and Ecstasy project. Leslie feels she had a vision when she was about 13 or 14, and she talks about it often in her work. And in 2001, 19 years ago, she went to North Carolina and collected the visionary experiences of 700 different people. So she recorded their stories and their visions, and then some of the phrases that were repeated over and over are hand embroidered on these banners by the artist. And they say things like, I heard a voice, my insides are on fire. We have all the banners listed on a text panel over there so you can read them. And then the red is a huge part of this piece. Obviously, it takes your breath away. And the red actually is a symbol of celebration and joy. And it comes from the time she spent in India. India is very important in Leslie's historic kind of influences. She spent a couple of years there, and that's when she realized that language was so important to her, because she couldn't understand or read the language over there, and suddenly it took center stage for her, and she started making these kinds of works. But here we are many years later when she creates this, and the red is a reference to the celebration color in India. It's worn in weddings. The red powdery surface of this figure references the tika, which is put on people's foreheads in religious rituals as symbols of blessing. So that is where that, that brilliant color comes from. Allie, you were able to get some close-ups? Okay. So then we're gonna, as Allie finishes giving you some more images of that piece, we're gonna move around to a different use of fabric. So now you should be seeing a work by Alicia Henry. Alicia is a Yale-educated artist. She actually lives in Nashville, Tennessee. She teaches at Fisk University, and this is a very different use of fabric than the last two pieces that you saw. Miriam Shapiro's robe was very pretty. It talked of the decorative and the ornamental. Leslie's use of fabric is very flamboyant. Alicia's is very different than that. You also have here a dress form like you did with Shapiro's robe, but this dress is a shift. It is like a workman's dress. It does not define the figure at all. Alicia makes a lot of disembodied figures or parts of figures to stand for the whole. And here you have this head that actually has a type of mask on it with a big nose. And then the neck is referenced. And then the arms and legs aren't, but the shape of the shift kind of stands in for the figure. So one of the things that women in 20th and 21st century art have done is talk about anti-beauty. As I mentioned before, men tended to depict women for centuries in a particular way, often as objects, as beautiful objects. And women wanted to take that back when they began to finally have their voices heard. And so here you see Alicia very purposefully messing with the idea of anti-beauty. This piece is not supposed to be beautiful. It is supposed to make you question. And there are literally layers to the piece. and figurative layers. The nose and the mask reference clowning and masking traditions in Africa that are used in rituals. But in this country, masking the nose tend to bring forth stereotyping of African Americans, the use of blackface by white people. So it really brings stereotypically dark connotations to our mind. And she wants you to think about both of those suggestions. She also wants you to think about the fact that we all mask in our everyday lives. And I don't mean our literal mask that we all have to wear nowadays, but the fact that when you go out into the world, you present a different persona no matter what you're doing. There's your work persona, there's your home persona, there's your mother versus child persona. You put on different identities as you move through your life. And we can all identify with that idea, and you don't ever really know what's going on with another individual. So this piece really makes you think. It is large, and it looms over you a bit. And there's a lot to it that I hope you can come and experience in person, a lot of details to the stitching. And Alicia also stitches the underside of these pieces, and you can't see that. And that's, again, a reference to the fact that we can't really know what's going on in someone's inner life. Okay, so we're going to go to the second gallery and look at a few pieces that don't have anything to do with fabric per se. So I haven't told you how we've acquired the last few pieces. They've almost all been museum purchases or connected to an exhibition we've done of an artist here. So Miriam Shapiro was purchased. Alicia Henry's work came out of the fact that she was in an exhibit here and we purchased the piece. Leslie Dill's work was our first traveling exhibit that we organized that went to several museums around the country, and then we got that piece. And then this one is Damballa by Lois Mailloux Jones, and we did a Lois Mailloux Jones solo exhibition, I believe in 2011 or 12, and purchased this work out of it. So we really try not only to focus on women in our exhibitions program, but to support them and as much as we can. So this piece also has a myriad of international influences. You can see kind of the graphic cubist approach, the abstraction of the figure, the simplification of form, masks, again, a reference to Africa and to Cubism, playing out across this work. You see a lot of bright colors, and it's signed Haiti, 1980. So Lois Mailloux Jones had a lot of different things that played into her work. First and foremost, she was a textile designer, and then she became a painter. She went to Paris, and this was in the 30s, I believe, and studied there at the Académie Julian. And African-American artists often felt more comfortable during that time in Paris. They felt they were much more accepted for their work and racially. So she spent a lot of time there, and those influences, the flatness of Cubism, the colors of Matisse kind of play in. Later in life, she married a man from Haiti, so you see some of that symbology here, and this work was actually done in Haiti. And then she also traveled several times to Africa, and you see that coming in. So this is really a work that's international. You know, this was an artist that lived a long life and drew influences from all over the world, and they're beautifully manifested here. Even the frame is carved to look like something from either from a craft tradition in Haiti. So it's really a beautiful piece, and I hope you can come kind of check out the details in person. Okay, I'm going to meet you on the other side of the gallery. Allie's going to take us to a nook Okay, this is one of our newest acquisitions. I think we bought it in towards the end of 2019, and it may be the last piece we purchased actually. And it is by artist Judith Schachter, and it is stained glass. The only other stained glass the Hunter has in its collection is from Lafarge, John Lafarge, and that's a historic window, probably made about 100 years ago. This was literally made in 2019. And although it looks like it's painted, it is actually a very complex process of sandblasting, layering glass, engraving, and a little bit of painting. And Judith says she gets most of her effects and her colors from layering glass rather than actually painting on them. The symbology is interesting. What you see here is a figure, presumably a woman. She has long hair, and she's laying on the ground, and she's inundated with a spray of flowers that comes from this almost cartoony bird up at the very top. And you could look at this metaphorically, like we all feel a little overwhelmed at times with things coming down onto us and trying to deal with life. But she very specifically takes a bit of a biblical interpretation. If you think about the fact that stained glass windows were traditionally in Gothic cathedrals and the light was divine light coming into the worshiper, this is Mary laying on the ground being visited by the Holy Spirit. So this is a bit of an annunciation scene, a metaphorical one, and that would have been a very popular subject for stained glass windows many hundreds of years ago. We do have a process panel here that explains Judith's process in more detail, and we also have a QR code that you can scan and read about it from her own perspective, where she goes through it step by step. It's very interesting, very intricate, and complex. Now we're going to go around the corner here to another work. This is by Chinese-American artist Hung Lu. So Hung Lu came to the United States many, many, many years ago. She is old enough to have lived through the Maoist regime and have been sent to the countryside to be re-educated, which happened to a lot of people who were considered scholars or cultural elites back in those times. So this is a reference to the time she spent in the countryside for 4 years. It's an image of two farmers pulling something. And it's actually, and it's massive. Again, you can see this is probably 8 feet across, it's 5 feet high, and it's a diptych, and it's a sister artwork to one where there's two women who are pulling something. So this is two men. When she was working in China, she was being trained to do propaganda murals for the state. So that is why she works in massive scale. You know, she's always been a large scale artist, and she was trained in realistic figurative work, and so she's excellent at that. But her interests were more in abstract expressionism. And when she moved to this country, she kind of combined what she learned about large scale mural painting and figurative painting with the expressionist dribs and the gestural paint application that you see throughout this work. From far away, it looks realistic, but when you get close to this, it's very gestural. The colors, the figures are put on with large slashes of paint, all different colors, going to make up something that looks almost monochromatic from far away. And then you can see circles and dashes and drips everywhere. It's very emphatic. Some of the photographs she works from were ones she took when she was in China and out in the countryside. And then often, since then, for decades, she has gone back and gotten pictures of anonymous individuals from flea markets and thrift stores in China. And so she is giving a voice to these people that were so anonymous in the world. What Ali is showing you right now is one of the details. The one that's just beautifully painted is this little golden snuff bottles with peaches and cherry blossoms on it, both symbols of prosperity and good luck in Asian cultures. There's also a dragonfly in this work, which is up here. So there's some, Asian symbology in the piece, but they're just little details kind of tucked in for you to discover when you come see the work. We have another work by Hung Liu in this exhibit as well. So I hope you're able to come in person and see that one along with all our other works. Do we have any questions? Okay.
Would like to know what took Leslie Dill to North Carolina and when was her exhibit at that?
When was Leslie Dill in North Carolina?
What took her there?
What took her there? So there's in North Carolina something called the Southeastern Center for Contemporary Arts, SECA. I believe it's in Winston-Salem. And they sponsored her to come do this project called Tongues on Fire, Visions in Ecstasy. And so she went and did the project, which included gathering everyone's stories, and then we made a lot of artwork based on that. This is one of the pieces that came out of it. She made several pieces that came out of it. And she continues to make work to this day that deals with visions. It's something she's really, really interested in. And then the other question was, when was the exhibit at the Hunter? So the Hunter exhibit was in January 2009, and then it traveled for the next 2.5 years to venues around the country. And FYI, we printed a lot of catalogs, and they're still in our museum shop if you would like to see the exhibit, if you want a printed catalog. It's really pretty. So, say it again? Okay. So it's massive, right? And you think we would not be able to store something like that. But I think there might even be pictures in our Instagram feed that show a little bit of that. Each of those banners rolls up on a tube, and each banner is only about this big when it's rolled up in a tube. So you have 11 tubes. The figure is tiny, and it gets wrapped up in fabric and plastic. And then there's a little chair that the figure sits on. So the whole footprint of the storage situation there is very small. And it's just that it takes up a lot of room when it's all built and installed properly.
Question about the Jones. Did Jones carve the frame herself?
Did Jones carve the frame herself? I don't know. I can look that one up for you. Somebody can figure that out, and we'll post that answer.
Final question that I see here is there a piece that maybe has shifted for you after seeing the other artworks?
So the other question was, is there a work where the meaning has shifted for you by seeing it with the other artworks in the gallery? That's a great question. So I'm not sure. I've only seen them together for a few days in this way. So at the end of the exhibit in a few months, I might have a different answer. I've been with the Hunter long enough and fortunate enough to have seen most of these pieces come into the collection, some before me, but most in the last 16 years. And the meaning definitely shifts over time, like the first time you acquire something versus the next time you put it on view. I will say the juxtaposition of all these women and all these artists working in one place has changed it for me. If Miriam Shapiro hadn't dabbled in fabric as a serious medium, so many of the pieces that are in this exhibit that also use the dress form or highlight things that were ignored for women wouldn't have been possible. And they're such powerful pieces that I think I never appreciated Shapiro's work in our collection the way I do now after seeing all these other women that have been pulling from that same tradition. So that's one that's definitely shifted for me. I don't know, I'd have to kind of consider that. And I think everybody will as they move through the exhibition. So, any others? Okay, well, that's kind of our time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We do have in-person tours that you can sign up for by going back to your original email and looking at the links. And they're today, Saturday and Sunday. So I hope you enjoyed your members preview, and we hope to see you here at the museum soon.